Hamas and Israel truce deal is at breaking point. Hamas says it is committed to the original agreement, while Israel wants more. The thing is, the continuation of Israeli violations of the ceasefire in Gaza remains a deeply contentious issue, sparking intense debate and global concern. Despite the ceasefire agreement, reports indicate that Israel has repeatedly breached the terms, leading to significant humanitarian crises and escalating tensions in the region. These violations include restrictions on aid, continued military operations, and the displacement of thousands of Palestinians. The ongoing conflict not only undermines the fragile peace process, but also exacerbates the suffering of civilians still caught in the crossfire. I am Bahman Roy, your host, and as we delve into this spotlight, it is crucial to examine the implications of these actions on the prospects for lasting peace and stability in the region. Let us begin with a short report.
Tel Aviv continues its violations, breaching the Gaza ceasefire over 900 times, killing 116 Palestinians. Violations include airstrikes, targeted killings, and delays in releasing Palestinian detainees, as per the ceasefire agreement.
Since the early stages, we were afraid that Israel will not stick to this deal. Yesterday, what Israel did is not acceptable by the mediators, Egyptians, and the Qataris, because the world is looking to finish the first phase of this deal, which should last for 42 days.
As a Palestinian, we know the Israelis by heart. They don't keep their covenants. They don't want the families of the Palestinian prisoners to feel the joy. They want to torture them. They want to deprive them joy.
In terms of aid blockade, the Israeli regime is only allowing an average of 23 fuel trucks daily when it is supposed to be allowing in 50. Also, the regime has prevented commercial imports of fuel and only allowed 15 mobile homes into Gaza when the deal had stipulated 60,000. While 500 heavy machines are needed to remove the rubble, only 9 were allowed into Gaza, and reconstruction material and medical equipment have also been restricted. Hamas official Osama Hamdan has criticized the violations and the Israeli regime's refusal to enter Phase 2 of the agreement and seeking to extend Phase 1.
We in Hamas have abided by all the ceasefire conditions in a precise manner and in accordance with the deadlines specified. We remain committed to entering the second phase. The occupation and its sponsors bear complete responsibility for not adhering to the ceasefire agreement.
Hamdan emphasized that Hamas is committed to the ceasefire agreement and called on the international community and ceasefire mediators to push the regime to adhere to the deal. Despite these breaches, the West remains passive, offering no more than lip service. To make matters worse, the U.S. even recently approved an additional $4 billion in military aid to Israel, violating its own laws against supplying weapons to entities that harm civilians. As the world watches in silence, Gaza remains trapped under the weight of destruction and despair. For the people of Gaza, every passing day is a struggle for survival, a testament to their resilience in the face of unrelenting oppression.
Welcome back. Allow me to introduce my guests. Charlotte Cates, International Coordinator, Sami Dun Palestinian Prisoner Solidarity Network, joining us from Beirut. And Mazin Kumsi, a Palestinian scientist and author, joining us from Bethlehem. Charlotte, Mazin, very good to have you on the program. I'm going to start with Charlotte here. Why a new proposal when there was already an agreement signed and partly executed?
We've seen time and time again that the Zionist regime routinely breaks and violates ceasefire agreements with the Palestinian people. And what we've also seen is that the clear strength of the Palestinian resistance, the resilience of the Palestinian people, the refusal of Palestinians in Gaza to be displaced from their land, the refusal of Palestinians in the West Bank to be displaced from their land, the very clear displays during the prisoner exchanges, which have both highlighted the moral clarity of the Palestinian resistance and the bankruptcy of the Zionist narrative, have further exacerbated the internal conflict within the Zionist regime as well. And as always, when there is an internal conflict, an internal struggle for power within the Zionist regime, the option that Zionist politicians seek is to displace that conflict by threatening to and often carrying out those threats to massacre Palestinians. And that's what we're seeing taking place again. They're attempting to break the strength of the Palestinian people in Gaza, which has held up so really astoundingly and overwhelmingly, despite the incredible destruction and violence and devastation visited on Gaza through this absolutely inhuman genocidal assault for over 16 months, through just the standard practice of refusing to follow through with ceasefire agreements, refusing to follow through on the agreements that they've signed. And as far as the West, and particularly the United States, are concerned, they're not just being silent in the face of this, they are full partners in the violation of the very ceasefire agreement that they are supposed to be the guarantor of, shipping another $3 billion in weaponry to the Zionist regime while they're supposed to be guaranteeing its participation in a ceasefire. That is full complicity in genocide, and it's exactly what we've been witnessing for the past 16 months and really for the past 76 years of Zionist colonialism and genocide in occupied Palestine.
Right, Charlotte. Of course, shortly I will get back to the role of the mediators and the US also. You mentioned that was very interesting. Martin, Hamas, many people believe that Hamas has shown great self-restraint, but always committing, staying and reiterating that they are committed to the truce deal, the one that has already been signed and partly adopted by the two sides. Despite all of these violations, even every prisoner swap, every captive prisoner swap, Hamas has taken the first step. But what is Israel pushing for here, really?
Israel is pushing for one of two options, basically, that they are giving the Palestinian resistance. Either we continue the genocide now and kill you, or we continue the genocide after you release the prisoners and we kill you. These are the two options that they are giving the Palestinian resistance. There is, obviously no win situation for the Palestinians that the Israeli and the Zionist movement is putting in front of us. So what I think is happening on the ground is very interesting. And it is clear that what they want to do is starve the Palestinians as a method of warfare, which they have used before, of course. And this is against the Geneva Convention, against the all moral and ethical and rational behaviors. And of course, the Palestinians will not simply surrender and allow themselves to be genocided one way or the other. So they continue to insist on Israel implementing an agreement that they have signed on to. Israel and the US, as Charlotte said, the US is supposed to be a guarantor of this agreement. They signed on to this agreement. That includes phase one, which was completed successfully despite the numerous violations by the State of Israel. And now it's time for phase two. And the Israeli public, the world communities are saying, go for stage two, phase two. And this charade, you're not going to win by diplomacy what you have failed to win by military means.
Right, Mazen. Charlotte, I'm going to go back to what you were talking about, the role of the mediators. What are they supposed to be doing right here in such circumstances? Because, they take a lot of pride when they make this deal happen. But at the same time, now they are all silent. I'm talking about Qatar and Egypt. They are silent while while the US administration is signing on 2,000-pound bombs to flow into Israel, while at the same time watching the humanitarian aid flow to totally stop.
It is the responsibility of the mediators to ensure that the agreement is implemented. And if one of the parties is refusing to implement the agreement, they certainly have the authority to implement it. For example, the border between Gaza and Egypt is an Egyptian-Palestinian border. There is no right for Zionist troops to continue to occupy that area or continue to be there or continue to have any role in determining whether people and goods can cross between Palestine and Egypt. This is absurd, and it's absurd that it should be accepted in any way by the mediators. There's a lot to be said about the essential failure of most of the Arab states. Yemen, of course, stands out as a really powerful example where there was not just popular and resistance participation, but participation through the government and armed forces in standing beside Palestine. But the fact is that most of the Arab states who rely on their relationship with the United States for their military support and essentially to remain in power are not practicing a truly independent Arab-oriented policy towards the Palestinian people, which is the Palestinian cause is at the heart of the Arab homeland and at the heart of liberation. But it's instead, this is a responsibility that's been taken up by resistance groups, and we see that in Lebanon, we see that in Iraq, we see that elsewhere in the region, and this is really an escalating crisis, particularly at the point that the mediators are not fundamentally living up to their responsibilities. And these are responsibilities that they hold not only to the Palestinian resistance as their role as mediators, but really fundamentally as Arab countries to defend Palestinian sovereignty, but also fundamentally Arab sovereignty and Arab development and no longer being subjected to Zionism. There's no reason why Egypt should continue to maintain a Camp David agreement with the Zionist regime that's refusing to recognize, that continues to actually threaten Egypt while refusing to recognize Egyptian sovereignty over an Egyptian-Palestinian land crossing. This is going to take a lot of struggle to confront. This is going to take a lot of struggle to face. It's going to require popular action, and not only, we can't expect officials and regimes to act in the absence of popular action and the absence of popular participation. But it's also very clear that there's tremendous revulsion throughout the region and on the part of the Arab people to the ongoing Zionist assaults, to the genocide over the past 16 months, to 76 years of Zionist colonization against the Arab people and against the Arab homeland, and particularly the escalation and threats that have been directed against all Arab countries, particularly by US President Donald Trump, together jointly with Netanyahu and his goons, together presenting, the collective Zionist imperialist threat. And this is the point where it's a real turning point. It was very clear when the Palestinian resistance said that they will not accept any party that is going to come in and seek to rule as an occupier in Gaza. And so this is a time to really recognize and stand with the Palestinian cause as the heart of the Arab cause, and really any future for true self-determination, independence, and sovereignty for not just Palestinians, but for Arabs throughout the region.
Exactly, Martin, continuing on what Charlotte was just speaking about and focusing on the role of the Arab mediators here in play. Even during the first phase, the 42 days, we witnessed so many violations by the Israeli side. We are still not sure what happened to the 60,000 makeshift homes that were supposed to get into Gaza from Rafah, but it's still waiting for a green light and never got it. So what role should they actually play, some meaningful position taking?
Well, the key mediators here are Qatar and Egypt. Both of them are allies of the United States. Both of them have military, U.S. military on their lands. Both of them are basically mentally colonized. They can liberate themselves, and Qatar has a better chance of doing so than Egypt. Egypt is dependent on U.S. aid pretty much for its military, and this was the Egyptian aid and the Israeli aid were the only two foreign aid that were exempted from Trump's slashing of all foreign aid, all U.S. aid, etc. So the U.S. still considers its investment in Egypt of weapons as to be a significant leverage on the Egyptian regime of Sisi. Qatar has more leeway, and Qatar has spoken out more frequently than Egypt did. But also Qatar has a military base, U.S. military base on its land, and so it feels also it must walk a tightrope. But we are talking about genocide here, an ongoing genocide and violations of international law and even violation of the U.S. law, as pointed out. U.S. law is very clear that they shouldn't support countries that persistently violate human rights. So I think the world needs, and there's an Arab summit coming up soon, I think they need to show some backbone. They need to realize that if you don't show some backbone, what will happen to you is like what happened to the King of Jordan: go to the White House, sit there and listen to Trump pontificate about what needs to be done by Jordan to help the Zionist project. And this is the most undignified and inhuman that a leader is subjected to. And if Sisi and Qatar Amir go to Washington and are subjected to similar treatments, the least they could do is not go. Second best thing is when they go, they could show a little bit of struggle like Zelensky did, a little bit. and this is important, I think. But in unity, they can find strength, and the Arab League summit is coming up, and it is a very, very important opportunity for them to redeem themselves.
Right, Mazen. Now, Charlotte, as Mazen was just talking about how the Jordanian king was intimidated by the assertive character of Donald Trump in the White House, and it was like everybody, I think even the Americans were surprised to see that. But at the same time, I'm going to talk and a little bit focus on this proposal per se. They call it, the Israelis call it a US proposal, while it is obviously just a displacement plan. But what is in it that the America is after, because Trump, in his inauguration, we haven't forgotten what he said about, like, he wanted his legacy to be of a peacemaker. But what kind of peace is he imagining for Gaza?
Trump is now the head of U.S. imperialism, and U.S. imperialism is the head of the snake in the region. So whoever is heading U.S. imperialism at this time, whether they are professing to be peacemakers or whether they are professing to be warmongers, doesn't change the nature of U.S. imperialism, and that U.S. imperialism views Zionism and the maintenance of the Zionist project as a long-term strategic investment, as their aircraft carrier. As the previous president, Joe Biden, said, if Israel wasn't there, we would have to invent it. So this is viewed as like a long-term strategic alliance. And I mean, on the level of Trump's personal commitments, his largest donor was Miriam Edelson, an extremely far-right Zionist who is well known for not just funding the Trump campaign, but also funding a whole assortment of Zionist projects, including various projects to attack activists who are working for justice for Palestinians in the United States and elsewhere. So basically running the right-wing Zionist newspaper Israel Hayom. So there's not going to be, this isn't going to be a place where people can look to for some kind of justice. After all, you can also claim it's peace peace if Palestinians are dead or displaced. And this is one reason why there is such hatred, frustration, wild propaganda directed against the Palestinian resistance and against the Palestinian people in Gaza, because the fact is that despite Netanyahu and Trump, all of the attempts to distort the image of the Palestinian resistance, to lie about what happened on October 7th, to hide the suffering of the Palestinian people, and to place the colonizers and the genocidaires as some kind of victims of those that they have been displacing from their land for the past 75 years, all of that has essentially failed in the eyes of public opinion, not just around the world, but even in the heart of the imperial core. We've seen literally millions of people taking into the streets in every major Western capital, not to mention on every university campus. The only way they're able to try to shut down this movement is essentially by carrying out various forms of mass repression, arrests, targeting, attacks. This is also because of this fundamentally is caused by the strength, the persistence, the clarity, and the clear moral victory and moral supremacy of the Palestinian resistance and its conduct throughout this battle, not to mention that of all of the resistance forces in the region that have participated in this collective struggle against Zionism and imperialism. There's no way to expect anything better from Trump. The fact is that one of the reasons why Trump was elected is because people were sick of 16 months of genocide being funded and directed by the United States, by Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. But it's also true that, Trump and Harris represented the same thing. It was, genocide versus genocide. And so it shouldn't really come as a surprise, even if it's disgusting to see these kind of AI videos produced by Trump, promoting golden statues of himself and himself basking with Netanyahu on the beach in Gaza. Like, there's this kind of clear disgustingness to it, but it's the same policy of elimination and targeting of the Palestinian people that has always been pursued by the United States. The only thing that can stop the U.S. from taking this position is popular organizing and power, so that it becomes impossible for U.S. politicians to continue to commit these crimes, and an international mobilization that's truly multipolar.
Right, Charlotte. And one final question for Mazen. Netanyahu, clearly emboldened by the unconditional support by the US president, has threatened Hamas with unimaginable consequences if they do not accept this new so-called proposal. But haven't they already tried military options?
Yes, and they will try again and again, and that's a definition of madness. The Zionist regime is mad, and it continues to have the only tool at its disposal, which is military. The other possibility is, of course, to see rationality and see justice and see human rights, but they're not willing to do that because they feel they have the privilege and they have the upper arm and they have the U.S. support and they can act with impunity. I think this will keep coming back to haunt them, realizing how they fail again and again and again at ending the Palestinian resistance.
Thank you so much, both of you. It was amazing to have you on the program. I really enjoyed your insight into these matters. That was Charlotte Cates, International Coordinator from Samidun Palestinian Prisoner Solidarity Network, joining us from Beirut, and also Mazen Kumsi, a Palestinian scientist and author, joining us from Bethlehem. Thank you so much, and thank you, our dear viewers, for staying with us on another Spotlight.